to another episode of The Lofty Lender. This week, I'm going to do a little pivot, and it's going to be, again, a little different than the traditional setup, similar to my AI conversation. However, I'm not doing this one solo. I've got Liz Leisure back with me. I've already had her on once, and by popular demand, she's back again. So this week, we want to dig in a little deeper with the NAR lawsuit and how that's really going to affect agents around here, as well as potentially nationally, is what some might see. So I've done a little research and found some of the most popular questions around this topic, and Liz and I are going to explore those together and get her thoughts on how the landscape of real estate will evolve over the next few months and years to come, and really what this is going to turn out to. So welcome back to the show again, Liz.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so first off, I want to provide a little background on this topic for anyone that may not be familiar with it, or you're a consumer and you just really have no idea what's going on. The National Association of Realtors, or NAR, settled a major lawsuit that will take effect August 17th, 2024. The settlement resulted from allegations that NAR's commission structures were anti-competitive. Here are the key details. 1. Settlement amount. NAR agreed to pay $418 million over 4 years to settle the claims brought against it. This payment aims to address financial risks and legal challenges related to broker commissions. 2. Liability release. The settlement includes a significant release of liability covering over 1 million NAR members, state and local associations, MLSs owned by associations, and most realty firms. This release aims to protect these entities from claims related to broker commissions brought on behalf of home sellers. 3. MLS changes. One of the most notable changes is the prohibition of compensation offers on MLS listings. Sellers will no longer be required to offer commissions for buyer agents as a condition for listings on an MLS. Instead, compensation can be negotiated off MLS through direct consultation with real estate professionals. Wow, that was a hard word this morning. Buyer representation agreements is number 4. Another significant change is the requirement for buyer agreements to secure written agreements with their clients before showing properties. This aims to ensure transparency and that buyers are fully informed about potential fees. I talked last week about this a little bit when I had Kayla McCormick on the show and really went in depth on that. So if you want to get really in the weeds on that specific piece of it, jump back and listen to my last episode and you can get into that one with Kayla. And then NAR's stance. NAR continues to deny any wrongdoing, but chose to settle to avoid prolonged litigation and the associated uncertainties that could harm its members and their businesses. These changes are expected to foster a more competitive and transparent real estate market, though they also pose challenges to existing business models within the industry. All right, so that was the background. Yes, I was reading a lot of that. Exactly. I was reading a lot of that because I didn't memorize most of that, but yeah. Liz, you and I were just talking, so I was originally thinking that this was going live July 1, and you mentioned that it's going live August 17th. Explain to me the details there.
Well, the NAR lawsuit is effective August 17th, but Iowa law changed July 1st to require that all buyers' agents get the buyer broker agreement signed, specifying what their compensation is prior to showing any houses. And so consumers are really going to see a big difference in being able to go look at houses just willy-nilly with different agents. So in order for any agent in Iowa, any realtor in Iowa, to show a house to someone, you have to have a broker-buyer agreement laying out the compensation. So that's the main thing that happened July 1st. And I've already, been showing houses and getting the buyer broker agreement signed. And there's been a lot of questions about it and suspicions about it and all that stuff. But it's been good. We've been able to explain everything, and some of the buyers are not wanting to lock in with the agent right away because they don't know him, and I don't blame them. They don't want to lock in with an agent for a long period of time because you haven't built that relationship yet. So, we're offering, a day, a week, whatever they feel comfortable with. Plus, they can cancel it at any time too. So, but it is required before we can open up the door and show them that house.
Does it feel like you are I mean, obviously, the first couple of times it felt weird, right? But does it also then feel like a more professional approach to that first meeting when you're now getting in instead of just walking in and looking at the house and meeting the person when you see the house? Does it feel like it's elevating that experience? Because obviously, there's some buyers where you've talked to, you've sat down, you've had coffee with them, you've understood their needs, you really get to know them before you go looking for houses. And then some buyers, you end up meeting them at the property. Does it feel like it's elevating that experience?
Yes and no, because it's something that, like you said, there are buyers that, I mean, the best way to go about buying a house is scheduling a meeting with an agent, interviewing agents, and then picking an agent. And then from that point forward, moving forward. And in those instances, you've had that conversation with them, and you're able to talk to them about what compensation is and how the compensation is paid, and all those discussions that are needed. And then finding out what kind of house are they looking for? Are they pre-approved? Do we need to get them to a lender so that they're comfortable with how much their payment's going to be before we start showing them houses? I mean, that's the best way to do it. But that does, as we all know, that's not the way it always happens, because a lot of times, especially from our referral companies, we just get a call that says somebody wants to go look at a house, and we would go open up the house, and we'd start the conversations when we'd open up the house with them, and then we'd build that relationship, and then have all the paperwork signed and get those discussions. Once people get comfortable with an agent, it's an easy conversation to have. But to meet someone for the first time and say, here, sign this paper, and they're like, what is this paper, and what do I need to sign it for? And I'm not signing anything, and what? I'm not paying you anything. It's hard when you haven't built that conversation, or when you haven't built that relationship with them. But I think people will get more comfortable with it, and realizing that it is something that is going to be kind of a given going forward. A couple ways to get around that by buyers is going to open houses. Open houses are not required to sign the buyer agreement yet, because they're just browsing. There's no discussion about buying yet. The minute they start discussing buying, they have to have that buyer agreement signed. So if you're just going and browsing, open houses is the way to go. I think that open houses are going to be more prevalent. I think we're going to see them on weekdays more often, and making it more convenient for people to go and look at houses. I also think you can, people are going to call the listing agent and just say, hey, can I just see this house? Because the listing agent is not required until they start talking about buying. If they start talking about buying, then again, a buyer agreement is going to be needed. Plus, in that instance, you're going to have a dual agency agreement, because that listing agent is representing the seller at the point that buyer is coming in and looking at the house. And so you've got to make sure that you're understanding that if you do call the listing agent to go and show them that house, they're not representing you. They're only representing the seller at that point. And they're opening the door because they're trying to sell the house for the seller. So, yeah.
I love that. And I didn't even really consider the fact that, open houses are really going to become a big thing again. And I think that they used to be a really big deal, and we've kind of gotten away from them a lot throughout the industry. But, there are definitely other markets outside of Des Moines where we see a lot of open houses that are during the week. And so this will definitely push into our market more.
Yeah.
One of the other questions I was curious about with that initial meeting with them is, does it feel like the consumer now maybe feels like they need to make a commitment sooner than later about, okay, I was originally just clicking on something because I wanted to go see this property, but now that they're asking me to sign this agreement, I need to get serious. Maybe I'm now suddenly going to be deterred from looking at homes for a while because I'm not actually as serious as I thought. I looked at this house and I'm just not ready for anything yet. Or, okay, I just need to make that decision to move forward and I'm ready to go. Like, does the agreement feel like that at all?
I think that it could feel that way. It doesn't necessarily have to. There's still going to be, people that are just putting their toe in the water to see what's out there, to determine if they're ready to buy, yet. So I don't think it has to be, but it definitely is going to seem a little bit more serious because you are required to sign a contract, and that's what a buyer agreement is it's a contract. And it says, if I show you a house and we buy a house, this is how much money I get paid, and I'm going to work, so that it doesn't come out of your pocket as much and it comes out of the seller side. But it is an agreement. It is a contract. And so, it's important for people to understand that.
So then one of the most popular consumer questions out there, when I was doing some research, was, will buyers have to pay more out-of-pocket costs when buying a house? What's the feeling on that?
It's possible. It's definitely a possibility. And the reason that is because sellers, although sellers have the ability for sellers to pay the buyer's agent's fee has always been there, whether they wanted to or not. I mean, we've had for sale by owners, we've had flat fee real estate agents. And so it's always been out there. This just makes it a little bit more of a conversation. I do think that the best way for a seller to sell their house is to still offer the buyer's agent compensation from their proceeds, because it's gonna allow the pool of buyers is going to be greater, because not all buyers have that cash in hand to pay for it out of their pocket. And so having the seller paying for it out of their proceeds is just a more logical way for it to happen. So, I still think, I think that conversation still needs to be had by the seller, and some part of the compensation should still be offered by the seller to make their property more viable to buyers. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. And I think that was always kind of there as well, right? You always could have said, I don't want to pay the buyer's agent, but you always,
or I want to pay them only a small amount, or I want to pay them a bonus because I really want somebody to come look at this. And so I want to really, I want to pay more. So it's just always been a discussion. The thing that's changed though, is the MLSs have required cooperation from the list side and the listing broker and the buyer broker. There had to be cooperation in order to be on it. It could be $1. It could have been $1, but it had to have compensation. Now it can say 0.
And thinking back, I remember a lot of agents that I had worked with in the past, they would say, hey, if I'm going to help you with your buying of your next house, and I'm also helping you with the selling of this house, you know what, I'm willing to do it for less. Maybe I'll do the listing for 2% and we'll do the other one for different, but they would still do, say, 5% in total, right? So they would still offer that 3% to the buyer's agents because, again, they were trying to attract the largest buyer pool. I think that this is really very similar in that they're still trying to attract that largest buyer pool by offering that buyer's commission.
Yep, and I'm gonna reiterate, there is no set price on what a buyer's agent is required to ask for, what a seller agent is required to ask for. That is totally between the seller and the seller's agent. And so, or in the buyer and the buyer's agent. And so, if you negotiate a 2% with your buyer, that they're going to pay you 2%, and the sellers decide that they want to pay 2.5%, that 0.5% does not go to the buyer's agent. They only get the 2% that they've agreed to with the buyer. Does that make sense? And so, and what happens with that 0.5% is going to be between, the seller and the seller's agent. It more than like it could go to, the buyer as selling, seller credits. It could go back to the seller. It could go to but the buyers. But whatever is agreed to between the buyer and the buyer's agent is all that they will get.
So I'm thinking on a large purchase, that 0.5% could make up several $1,000s. Is it possible that you decide you're going to pay your buyer's agent 2%, the listing side says we're paying 5 and we're paying 2.5 to the buyer's agent, that extra 0.5% goes towards reducing the purchase price? Is that a possibility at all?
It could. Okay. Yep. It's all part of, and as of August, Because in Iowa right now, on the purchase agreement, we're not allowed to talk about any compensation for the buyer's agent. It cannot be on the purchase agreement, but as of August 15th, I think, 15th, I don't know. I'd have to go look that up. But August 15th or 17th, Iowa law is changing, and our purchase agreements are going to put exactly how this buyer's agent is going to be paid. And so it'll be spelled out in the purchase agreement, which will make it a lot cleaner and clearer.
That's excellent, because for me as a lender, I want to know, is my buyer having to come up with that extra cash? Because some of my buyers don't have that extra cash. So it's good to see that.
Exactly. Yep.
So you may not know this because you don't work for NAR, but do you have any idea how much, what are the rumors of how much consumers are going to be getting from this $418 million? Like, there's a lot of money out there. Am I going to see a cent for selling a house in the last 7 years?
I mean, it's possible, but it's not very much money. It's when it breaks it down, it's in the hundreds of dollars, not thousands of dollars. And the people, honestly, the people that are making money off of this settlement are really the lawyers. I think I'm sure they're like 30%, 33%. People complain about our real estate commission and how big it is and how much it is. And you look at lawyers and, they do this big lawsuit and get, billions of dollars, and the law firms get, 33% or something like that. So it's crazy.
But they only get one of those every few years, Liz. It's only, several $1 million every few years. It's not as good, right? No.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have no idea on this, but I was reading the article about how this whole class action suit started. And I read, and maybe this is inaccurate, I'm not sure, but what I had read is that there was a couple down in Kansas City who had originally worked with their agent. After they closed, they decided, we don't feel right about that. We feel like we shouldn't have had to pay the buyer's agent money. And so that's kind of where it started. And they went to their attorneys, and it just kind of grew and grew from there. I'm curious, and again, you probably don't know the answer to this, but I'm curious if somebody who starts that class action suit, if they get paid better, like, do they get a little money on this?
I honestly, I don't know those. I don't know that answer. I've wondered that too. And I wondered, was it really, this is my, I don't know.
Conspiracy theory?
Conspiracy theory, was it invented? Did the lawyers go out and try and find somebody that would then, say, yes, I agree with that? And then I also wondered, did they turn around and buy a house once they sold it? And when they bought the house, who paid the buyer's agent? That's what I want to know, because I guarantee you that they bought a bigger house, because everybody moves up until, the very end, and then you move down. But it's like you move up in price, and they're complaining about the money they paid to the buyer's agent at that time, but then they turned around and bought a new house. Who paid their buyer's agent? And I bet it was more, and so in the long run, it evens out. But it is, it was just a lawsuit, and we've been talking about this for years. We've been preparing for this for, a couple years now, knowing that it was probably not going to fall our way, because, just because the DOJ is not as open to the way that real estate agents are paid right now. And so that's where, the DOJ kind of backed what was going on with this lawsuit a little bit. So,
yeah. And who knows? Maybe that couple, maybe they're completely AI generated. Maybe they don't even exist. Who knows?
I'm sure they're real people. It would have came out in the court, I think, if they were. But
yeah, and it was apparent that it wasn't going to go well when the lawsuits came out, and then so it was first NAR, and then it was a lot of the major brokerages, and it was just one after another. Every couple of days, another major brokerage got added to that lawsuit. So that made sense. And
you read in the beginning that the brokerages that are part of NAR are now, they cannot get sued again for this same thing. Only brokerages that are under a certain amount of dollars. And so there were a few additional brokers that hadn't been included in the original lawsuits that then had to go and kind of negotiate their own settlements as well. But thank goodness, I'm next home, and we're newer, so we're not as big as some of the bigger ones. So we fall under the NAR agreement. So.
And some of them are just too small for attorneys to go after, because there's just not any money there, right? So
yeah.
So then when you first heard that all this was, when the settlement was going on, I think I even called you and you had some thoughts. When the settlement became official, what was the mindset at that point? Like, is it, okay, I saw this coming from a mile away and now it's here? Was it, why did they settle? What was the mindset for you and how did you feel initially? And then looking back on that, second part of the question is, do you feel like you were validated or vindicated in those feelings, or do you feel like you maybe overreacted a little bit in your head and things actually turned out better than what they are, or what are your thoughts?
So when I first started hearing about it, of course, change is never comfortable to, most people, but I really, just took it in stride and, understood what we would need to do. And none of it was earth shattering. None of it was going to change the industry where, we were going to do something totally different. And I'm a big believer on, being as ethical, being as transparent, being as, above board and following the rules as possible. So, the minute we got wind, we started talking about, well, okay, what does this mean? And, we've had several meetings going over the form so people understand what the form is, several meetings on, what do we need to do come July 1st, tried to get people to, implement it as soon as possible so that they got more comfortable with it. But, it's a little different conversation at the very beginning, but nothing else has changed.
So one question that I don't know that you're going to have the answer to, but again, this is you don't work for NAR. So do you have any idea where they came up with that 418 million? Why that number, and how does NAR come up with that money? Do they just have a bunch of extra cash sitting around, and where do they get it in the first place?
Yeah, no, I'm sure that from what I've understood from all the, the podcasts and the webinars and the, discussions that I've had with people in the industry, they pick a number that's not going to make people go bankrupt, but a number that will hurt and be, so I think they pick that number so that they know that they have enough cash on hand to handle it. I believe that we'll probably have some kind of assessment with NAR over a period of years to get, to repay, to refill the coffers or whatever, because NAR isn't important. It's an important, entity for real estate agents. They do a lot for consumers and for realtors, to ensure that, things are done with the best, intent in mind for the consumer. So they do a lot, and I don't believe that NAR should go away because of them settling. There's a lot of discussions. Yeah, there's a lot of discussions from people that say it should go away, but they do so many good things. We need an association that really holds our industry in higher standards, making sure we have those rules to follow. The reason that it came about was because people were representing themselves as realtors or as a real estate agent, and it was just kind of, it was Wild West out there. And then, of course, real estate agents got really bad name because there were a lot of unscrupulous things going on way back in the day. And so it's like we need an association that really sets the standard and then holds everybody to that standard.
And I couldn't agree more, because I think of my world, right? We've got the Mortgage Bankers Association. Mortgage Bankers Association, they go to Capitol Hill every year. They lobby for some of the different bills that, we're trying to get rid of trigger leads. We're trying to get rid of things that they're just not right for the consumer, and they make our lives a lot harder, but also really hurt the customer experience. So having that voice, that's those relationships that are already out there with the association and Capitol Hill make it a lot easier. And if that was to go away, now you're looking at some of the major brokerages around, right? And saying, hey, you guys need to go start doing this. Maybe they've got the people, maybe they don't. But then, are rules then going to favor only the big brokerages? Same way within real estate. Are rules only going to favor your biggest brokerages out there? And someone like Nexthome, who's newer, may not, have a favor in a ruling if they don't have somebody who's lobbying for the entire community. So can totally appreciate that. Do you think that your Membership dues are going to have to go up then in order to pay this back?
Oh, I don't know. I suspect that we will have some kind of an assessment for this. But again, I think that they're still looking out for the best of us, and that it's going to be worth whatever we're going to have to, pay going forwards.
Well, we've really vetted this topic well. Is there any final comments that you have or anything else you want to add to this point?
I don't think so. I think we've talked it through pretty good. If anybody has any questions, they surely can contact me, and we can, talk through what the new law means, what's going to happen in August. They surely can give me a call and we can chat.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, Liz, for jumping on here and explaining this. 20 minutes. I feel like anybody that wants to listen to this and, if they're really confused, listen again. You'll learn a lot more from it. But appreciate you being here, and make sure to hit that subscribe button, follow us on social media, and stay tuned. As always, if you enjoyed the show, please leave us a review and share it with your friends. Your support means the world to us and helps us bring more exciting content. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, and we'll see you next week on The Lofty Lender.